I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's 6:30, and we will be going into closed session, and then we'll come back with results. Pardon?
Quorum.
Call for a
Quorum,
quorum,
please.
yes. Trustee Hack? I'm here. Trustee Lathan?
Here.
Trustee Lewis?
Present.
Vice President Rocha?
Here.
President Hernandez?
So we'll close for now.
I'll recall the meeting to open session at 7:12. Maya, can you reestablish the quorum?
Yes. Trustee Hack?
I'm here.
Trustee Lathan?
Here.
Trustee Lewis?
Present.
Vice President Rocha?
Here.
President Hernandez?
Here. Moving on to B, reports from closed session. There's nothing to report outside of direction given to staff. Item C, flag salute. I will lead us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll move on to item 3D, approval of board minutes for the regular Board of Education meeting of September 11th, 2024.
I move approval.
Second.
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to approve the minutes of September 11th, 2024. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no. And the motion passes. Moving on to superintendent reports, I will pass it to Dr. Martinez.
Thank you, Board President Hernandez. Good evening, Board members. Last Thursday, our very own Nicole Vicknair, Bidwell High School teacher extraordinaire, was named one of 2 Contra Costa County Teachers of the Year. It was a great honor for her. Her ability to engage, connect, support, and bring joy to students while at the same time holding high expectations for their success is simply a testament to amazing teaching. We're beyond proud of her, and she will now move on to the state round for consideration of being potentially named one of the state teachers of the year. And again, it was a thrill to be with her. Our Christina Barrow is with me, her principal, LaTanya Williams, director, Lindsay Wisely, and several other staff members, and she was introduced by one of her students, which was just thrilling and wonderful. Also, last Thursday, our site principals, education directors, and several board members attended a professional development presentation by Dr. Anthony Muhammad. He shared many important concepts regarding transforming school culture, spent some time reminding us each of our soul story, our why, if you will, and provided a significant level of guidance on how our site and district leaders can work to create exceptional school cultures in an inclusive process if we work to live up to the ideals of what professional learning communities truly is. Dr. Muhammad's presentation was in alignment to the work of Dr. Damon Harris, who provided the professional development at the start of the school year as part of the 3-year plan to enhance all of our schools in the entire district and striving to maintain our focus on helping our scholars reach their goals in a safe, equitable learning environment. This week, our Antioch High School and Deer Valley School are also having homecoming.
Right.
So full homecoming weeks activities are going on at all the schools. And there's, again, continuing many positive events at each of our elementary schools and middle schools as well. So very positive things happening in the district. So thank you. That's the report tonight.
Great. Thank you. Moving on to 5 school reports. We have item A, high school representatives report.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Natalie Rendon, and I'm the current Senator of Media at Antioch High School for our Student Government Program, and I'm also involved in our Leadership and Girl Power program, and I'm also the varsity sideline cheer team captain.
Okay, sorry. Hi, I'm Kelsey Gilbert. I'm the ASB Vice President. I'm involved in multiple clubs around school, and I'm enrolled in our student government class. Yeah, I really like getting involved with things. Yes, I also play flag football.
So last week, our school hosted a Start With Hello event. This is led by our peer advocates and supported by numerous leadership and staff groups. This is a national program that features a week of community building with students. Ms. Schweitzer, who is the peer teacher, said in times where our community can be so divided, it is important to remember connection is the key to healing and growth. I'm very proud to be working in a community that makes an effort to be inclusive and kind. During this week, our peer team visited a variety of classes and hosted lunchtime activities which engaged with many students as possible.
In more amazing news about this program, the AHS Peer Advocate Program was recently awarded a $1.2 million peer-to-peer mental health high school pilot demonstration school grant. We are one of 8 programs across the state to be a demonstration school and awarded this transformative amount of money.
After a 4-year break, our Panther Tales program is back on trail. In 2016, we created a community program for the Antioch Animal Shelter, and this is a partnership between it features our cross-country team and an animal care club which helps socialize and walk the not yet adopted dogs. But like many programs, Panther Tales was shelved in 2020 because of the pandemic. The care club is determined to get this back into volunteering and is now doing weekly visits to include members walking some dogs around downtown areas and others giving kittens some attention and love.
Club members are also helping do a variety of other helpful duties at the shelter, said Kat Cottle, animal service manager. Being able to have care club volunteers assist with the shelter animals is rewarding for the students and, of course, our animals. It is great for us to see the kids have these meaningful experiences and memories while providing care and attention to our homeless pets.
This week is also our homecoming week. This is where 6 senior girls and 6 senior boys will make the royal court. We've had Spirit Week all week so far, and which is included today we had a Soka Senior. Soka Senior is where we had a fundraiser which students had the opportunity to purchase different size buckets and got to pour it on our top 6 candidates, and it was a good fundraiser. And then tomorrow will actually be our rally where we have all our students come down to our auditorium and we will have different skits for those top 6 candidates. On Friday, there will be a football game where our homecoming queen and Mr. Panther will be crowned at the halftime of the football game. That Friday, we also have a Spirit Day, which is called the Happiest School on Earth, Disney themed, where they will rep our colors black and gold. And then on Saturday, we are having our homecoming dance.
Senior Zach Gregson was recently named one of 100 students in the Contra Costa County to be named as a 2025 National Merit semifinalist, which takes a huge amount of dedication and hard work. His school counselor, Violetta, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, Orozco, said that this is a huge honor to make it as a semifinalist. She doesn't recall having won at our site before, so it's very few in our county have qualified, so it's a great honor. Here's wishing Zach, who represents Antioch High School and our community district, the very best in this competition.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. Rendon, are you part of that team? I mean,
Yes, I'm also on top 6 for homecoming court.
yeah, and you got wet.
Yes, I did. It was very cold.
Well, congratulations for being part.
Thank you so much to our Antioch High School representatives. Moving on to item 6, public comments. We have a public comment from Claudia Lopez Lu Percio.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself fairly quickly. I'm Claudia Lopez Lupercio. I'm with the California School Boards Association, and I'm making my rounds. It's been a bit of a tough time considering we have a very large region in Alameda County and Contra Costa, but we're here to serve all of you, trustees and president. So if there's anything that you need, whether it's resources, research, advocacy, please contact me, and I am at your service. So I'll go ahead and leave my card with Maya, and we can be in contact. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Moving on to 6B, individuals to address the board regarding items not on the agenda from district employees. We have none. Moving on to 7, district reports. There are none. Moving on to 8, hearings, sufficiency of textbooks and instructional materials, public hearing.
All right, so annually, we submit, it's a requirement through California Ed Code that we hold a public hearing. And we have reported that all of our principals stated that their schools have the required materials for students for both home and school use. And so we're just having it here tonight as part of that public hearing, and it'll come back next time for approval.
Great. So I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Do we have any comments or people who wish to speak? All right. If not, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Great. Moving on to 9, public presentations. There are none. 10, consent items. Are there any items that we need to either make comments on or discuss separately or vote on separately?
Yes, I'd like to make comments on 10F and 10M, as in Mary.
Yeah, you can go ahead and do that now.
Okay, so both of these are very similar in scope in terms of my comment. So 10F highlights the need for SPED employment training. So this is a collaboration where our CBI students are getting support training, and you know, those types of activities can lead to lifelong learning and, you know, finding a sense of purpose. So I've worked a lot with that community. So, you know, having that opportunity is phenomenal. Secondarily, 10M, I'll read out the the item. Let me get up to it. So the MOU between Contra Costa County Office of Ed and the Technical Education Incentive Grant. So these types of activities, again, are providing opportunities for our youth to get training and future opportunities. Because if I'm a student and I'm thinking back about myself, when I graduated high school, I'm a first-gen student. I kind of didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do or was interested in. And so these types of programs can provide guidance and could lead to students understanding kind of what they want to do. And this lends itself again to you know, the conversation around hiring a grant writer, because the more of these opportunities we have, the more likely we are to support students in their interests. So just those 2 comments. Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Trustee Lathan.
Thank you. 10C, the donation report. Just wanted to say thanks to Stuart Burr for the donations totaling $2,500. And the donated items include power tools, hand tools, and drum sets to our school. So thanks to Stuart Burr. And then 10G, service agreement with Kidd Crawford Esquire. It's a law firm. We get a lot of contracts and agreements for law firms that we're working with, and it doesn't specify what type of law they specialize in. I'm just curious, like what, for this one, what is their law specializing in, their firm?
Honestly, I'm not sure if they have a variety, because oftentimes the contracts that we have with law firms have a variety. Some of them do contract work, some of them do employment cases, you know. So typically our bigger firms do that. This particular one, we are contracting with for their special ed expertise.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Great. All right, then I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
I move approval.
Second?
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to approve all consent items A through P. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no, and the motion passes. Moving on to 11 action items. We have item A, the 2023-24 unaudited actuals.
Okay, good evening. So this is our presentation on the unaudited actuals, and what that is the actuals on how we ended the 23-24 school year. And then what will come to you next for the 23-24 school year will be the audited from the independent auditors. So here's the 23-24 unaudited actuals. It'll be compared to what we were doing as estimated actuals when you approved the budget. So at that time, when we were approving the budget, we were trying to figure out how we're going to end the year compared to what our budget will be for 24-25. And now this is just strictly showing how we ended the year. So it's through June 30th, 2024. Here is a snapshot of the last few years of our enrollment and if it increased or decreased, and our actual ADA. And if you look right here for the 24-25, this was what we put in as our budget for an estimate. When I ran the enrollment this week, it looks like we're over 15,000, a little over 15,100. We're still working on to see if we have some inactive students in that count, but this number could increase, so that's good news. Our ADA, this is our actual ADA, but what you will see when we actually get the funded ADA, it's based on the 3-year prior average. And so it's a little bit different, but this is our actual ADA. So you can see the increases and decreases based on prior year. So here is our revenue sources. This is how we report our revenue. We have basically what we call 4 different buckets. Within those buckets, there's several different types of revenue. But the changes that happened from how we estimated it to how we actually ended the year, we had a slight increase, excuse me, to our LCFF. We had a slight increase to our ADA, so that helped increase our revenue. That's the unrestricted piece of our revenue. Our federal revenue was a decrease, and that's basically a deferred revenue. So we have unearned revenue on projects that we thought we were going to do and spend. And with federal revenue, it's called unearned revenue. So if you haven't spent it, you don't get to recognize it in that year. And so that'll be pushed out to the budget year. We have other state revenue that increased. We got more lottery revenue than we expected. We did get more home-to-school transportation money, and if you remember, that was a grant that we got. It actually is recorded on the unrestricted side, but it's restricted for home-to-school transportation for our students to start the new program of transporting more of our students. And we do have a pilot program going on at Orchard Park and Turner. And then there's another revenue that increased. It's called Stirs on Behalf. But that is basically a revenue that we book and then an expenditure that we book that you'll see. And that's based on our portion of the outstanding OPEB for a PERS. So it's just an entry that we're required to book for GASB. And in this case, our entry based on the state liability increased. And so it shows an increase in revenue, but also an increase in expenditure. So it's really a net zero. And then other local revenue, this is probably the biggest change, and that is our interest. We did get a lot more interest than we had booked, and that we expected because the interest rates were so high. And so we did things. So that's probably really the biggest change to our revenue side of stuff that wasn't necessarily attached to that for an expenditure. Here is our 23-24 expenditures. So these are the categories in which we record our expenditures over here on the left. There wasn't really too much changes between salary and benefits, except for the Stirs on Behalf. That's again, a liability that we book based on the revenue.
Thank you.
We do have a decrease in both books and supplies and services, and a pretty large decrease in capital outlay. But about $7 million of that is stuff that's going to be spent in the current year. So we have HVAC project that you just approved that was in the budget. And so we didn't spend the money because we're just now getting to the project, and so we'll spend it next year. We also had the HVAC project that you approved, I think, at the last board meeting. Again, that was budgeted in last year, and it will be pushed out. So what happens is that the expenditures decrease, and it falls to the ending fund balance, and then we book it in the following year when we spend it. So anything that's not done by June 30th, so if it's not received, if it's a supply or a product that's not received by June 30th, or if the project's not complete, even if we start it on June 1st, but it's not done by June 30, it doesn't get booked in that year. It gets pushed out to the next year. So the changes in our total expenditures is just over $11 million. Like I said, about 7 or more of that will get spent in this year that has attached expenditures to it. So total revenues and expenditures for the 23-24 year, we had about $315 million that we booked and 304 expenditures that we booked for the year. We had our contribution to deferred maintenance, and so our net increase to the fund balance was a $4 million. So The net difference, if you compared to what we thought we were going to do to what we did, we went up to 88, almost 89 million. Again, a lot of the ending fund balance that's showing here is going to be the HVAC and the technology projects that were started but not completed. So this is just a description of what I just talked about. It shows you sort of what the changes were by each category. This shows you breaking out between the unrestricted and the restricted side. So the unrestricted is basically the local control funding formula. That's the largest operational expense that we have and the revenue that we get. The restricted side is all the state and federal and local revenue that's restricted for specific purposes. For example, the 2 high school girls just explained to us a grant that they got, right? 1.2 million. That goes on the restricted side because it's for a specific purpose for Antioch High School. So that's the difference between an unrestricted and restricted. So this just kind of breaks out between how much we spent for the unrestricted side versus the restricted, and this is the net expenditures for the total general fund, which is Fund 01. So you can see that our ending fund balance between the two is 88. Of that, 58 is restricted and 30.5 is unrestricted. And the largest difference for the ending fund balance for the unrestricted side, like I said, is interest, because that is unrestricted. This is the components of ending fund balance. This is a very important slide to show. So of the 88 million, what is made up of it? What is that made up of? And I know it's small here, but you can see these are the grants. So these are the restrictions and how the money comes in and how it will need to be spent. We have our reserve for economic uncertainty, which is required by the state. It's 3%. This district in the past had an additional 2%, and then we took it out. So it's something that we might want to talk about in the future to have a little bit more of a larger reserve for economic uncertainty as we go into the years of budget being difficult. Our other assignments are our home to school transportation, what I mentioned before. It shows on the unrestricted side technically when you look at the books, but it's actually a restricted program. These other designations are things that we have talked about that we had reserved for E-rate, our E-rate project that we're doing, our security improvements, and that's part of the grants that we're doing, that we have to do the matching for the grants that we received. I will call attention to the dental and medical. So when we did our employee negotiations and we settled for future years of dental and medical, and so that was coming from the ending fund balance. So there's a reserve, there's assignment for the money that we had from the ending fund balance, and that's how we plan to spend the ending fund balance, and that is to spend it on the medical and the dental until 2026. And so our undesignated, which is this just under $1 million, is meaning that we have an unassigned amount of money that there's no designations. So that's what we call the general fund. And now I'm going to move into the other funds, unless we want to take questions now on those slides.
Yeah, I do have a question on the slide we were just on, slide 10. So I know you said that we have just a little bit under $1 million in unassigned. But can you explain what the assigned for future deficits and elevated expenditures for $4 million, what that money is set aside
Yeah, so when we developed our budget, in order to offset our expenditures for the future for 25, 26, and 26, 27, we were having to take money from the ending fund balance until we made adjustments to the budget. Because the way it standard with the COLA and the projected ADA, we were going to have less revenue to offset our expenditures. And so as part of the budget development and the multi-year, we had money that we set aside for ending fund balance to offset the deficit.
Got it.
So I did have a question on an earlier slide, and it'll be quick. So for those funds, back on slide 5, you mentioned the unearned revenue.
Uh-huh. And
you said that those could be pushed forward for a number. Do we have an estimate on how many years those can be pushed forward, and where in that continuum are we?
So part of that money was ESSER,
Uh-huh.
was the ESSER funds, and that had to be spent by September 30th. So there was
This year?
Of this year, yes, yes. But some of that money is like Title I, and it should really be spent, you know, we often have carryover in Title I, which is unearned revenue. And so it needs to be spent in the following year. So it's not like the ESSER where you were able to spend it. However, if you go to our components of ending fund balance, just to give you an example of ending fund balance versus unearned revenue, we have the art and music block grant, this 8.5. So that's money that's carried over, and that is a one-time money that's carried over, not unearned, but it's carried over, and we do have a couple years for that.
Okay. And so
But
if I'm understanding that those unearned revenues can carry over year to year because they're sort of in the, almost in, kind of like they're in arrears?
Yes, so we call it unearned revenue because if we haven't spent it, we haven't earned it. And that's typically a federal
Yeah.
money. You don't do it that with state typically. There's
Right.
very few states that have unearned revenue. Yeah. Okay. So now we're moving on to other funds. Here is a slide that just kind of gives you a quick definition of what all the other funds that we operate within the district. We just talked about the general fund, which is the primary operating fund. On the next slide, you'll see how we ended the year on all the other funds. We have adult ed, we have food services, Fund 13. Our deferred maintenance is what we're using to help improve our HVAC, mostly our HVAC, but there's a lot of other deferred maintenance items that will be coming out of Fund 14 in conjunction with Fund 21, which is our bond fund. So when we sell the bonds, that's where the money will go for the bond. Our capital facility fund is our developer fees. So when we get developer fees, it goes specifically in Fund 25, and it can only be spent for basically growth. That's what that fund is for. Fund 40 and Fund 49 are other capital project funds. And then Fund 51 is really sort of just the in and out for bond payments. So basically, the county treasurer puts the money in there, and then we pay it, and then, so it's not really a fund that we control. And then we have Fund 71, which is our retiree benefits. It's our OPEB. We save for our outstanding retiree benefit payments. So here's just a quick snapshot of the beginning balances on the first row, what our revenue was for the year, what our expenditures were, and then you can see the ending fund balances for all the different funds. And that is unaudited actuals. Again, so now that we've closed the books and we're still dealing with the audit, the actual audit with the independent auditor, we update the current year, and then we'll come to you in December and we'll show you the updates, how it applied to the current year, and then how we're doing with the current year based on what our budget was.
Great. Any further
My
questions?
question is, on scholarship money, is that kept in the student activity, or is that a separate thing on a school site?
So typically, the school sites have scholarship funds. We may have one or two in our restricted side for scholarship. I'd have to check on that. I know in my last district, we had it in both places. But what that Fund 08 is actually, it's all the ASB. It's the student body money, and we don't necessarily hold it here, but a few years ago, GASB changed, and we're obligated to report it on our books. So we basically get the information from the school sites. They have their own bank accounts and their own signers, but we run it through our financials, and we report it in our audit.
Interesting.
Great. Trustee Lewis?
I was just going to say thank you and the team for putting this together. I
Yes.
can imagine how much
Yes.
effort went into
Yes.
this.
I
And so
appreciate
additional
that. Thank
appreciation
you. Yes,
for-
I do want to do a shout out to my team. Thank you. Mia and the rest of the team do work really hard. And, like I said before, toggling one year and this year and budget and actuals, it's a lot of things going on. But thank you very much for,
I have another question.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, and maybe it doesn't fit, but with the new growth that we're having, developer fees, are we receiving some income?
are you talking about developer fees? Or you're talking about ADA?
Not the ADA from the student, I'm thinking of the building that's going on.
So yes, so for the new houses that don't have already have a mitigation agreement set up, we are receiving it. Yes, and that's in Fund 25. So let's go back here. So if we look at Fund 25, we have it just under 11 million. So we're estimating about 2.8 million of revenue
Additional.
additional. Well, that's how much we received. So the trend might be different, actually. So I'm not sure how much we budgeted for 24, 25. But if it's probably similar to that amount. Because I think the rate of growth has been somewhat steady as far as the number of houses. It hasn't been a ton, but I think it's been, so probably between 2 and 3 million.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to accept the unaudited actuals, and we're approving the actual, the slate forms that are, the state forms that are on there, not the presentation we saw.
I will move approval.
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to approve the 2023-24 unaudited actuals. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. And the motion passes. Moving on to 11B, initial proposal from Antioch Unified School District to Antioch Education Association for 2024-2025.
Yes, good evening again. This is the sunshine proposal, is the term we use for this school year with the AEA, or Certificated Association, and primarily the concepts that we'll be talking about were included in the previous agreements. Again, we will talk about salary and benefits. We will talk about Article 17, transfers, and Article 11, hours of employment. AEA had already brought their sunshine, so this is a formal process that we go through to ensure that the public is aware of what we'll be talking about. And now we'll be setting up, again, negotiation dates and entering into negotiations with them. So we look for your approval.
Any questions? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to accept the initial proposal.
I move approval.
I'll second.
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to accept the initial proposal to the Antioch Education Association for 2024-2025. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no, and the motion passes. Next, we'll move on to the initial proposal from the Antioch Unified School District for 2024-2025 to the California School Employees Association, Chapter 85.
Correct, and we have, again, a secondary team that we work with for the classified negotiations with CSEA. In this round of negotiations, the next item will be CSEA's Sunshine to Us, but for the district's perspective, we'll be talking about salary and benefits, and we will be talking about Article 13, leaves. And so we look for your approval on this for the district's proposal.
Great, so similarly, unless there's any questions, I will entertain a motion to accept the initial proposal.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes.
Dr. Martinez, when you say the district put out our own kind of request, right, to open up their contract for CSCA?
Correct.
That's what this one is about?
Correct.
And you said about Article 13 leaves. Can you leave like?
So Article 13 is a broad encompassing for all leaves, employee leaves, so types of leaves. There'll be medical leaves in there, military leaves. There's some structural concepts that we want to work on to ensure appropriate understanding of the contract language for the benefit of employees and the benefit of the district. That's our focus.
So how then, what role does a board play? And because I'm wondering, like, in terms of values, is this about values that district people are holding and saying we want to revisit this, but how do we know if it's aligned to the board values and our ideas around employees and leave? So where does that play a role?
Well, this is coming from the coordination of just working with the Personnel Commission and the communications we've had with CSEA. So through the process of the negotiations, this was one area where we thought would be important for us to clarify because it helps to streamline some of the services that we're providing to employees. A lot of our employees do have leaves. They take them away from the work process. Again, the board's goals have been working with our employees overall, ensuring that they have a safe place to work, a good place to work. And so the coordination of having employees at work is important.
So can you tell us what the proposal is? Or is it not appropriate?
It would be
in
more
this setting?
appropriate in closed session.
Okay, I would love to hear what you're proposing to the staff. just so we can know.
Yeah. And again, coming back to when there's a tentative agreement, if there's any language changes to those all come to the board for approval through the process, so you get to review those as well. But again, that's generally suited for a closed session item where we can talk about negotiations. So that's if something the board would like to do, that's the perfect place to do it.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move approval.
I'll second.
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to accept the initial proposal for Antioch Unified School District for 2024, 2025. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no, and the motion passes. Now moving on to item D, the initial proposal from California School Employees Association for 2024, 2025 for Antioch Unified School District.
I'm not seeing the board CSEA president here. I don't know if Mr. Sandoval was going to say anything or not, or I can speak to it. Yep. Yeah. CSEA representative, Luis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Luis Sandoval. I'm the second vice president from CSEA Chapter 85. Unfortunately, Mr. Atkinson couldn't be here this evening. My understanding is that official paperwork has been submitted to Dr. Martinez regarding Article 18, which is
It's, oh, you got it?
Thank you. The grievance procedure, Article 18. My apologies.
No, that's all right.
And that's all I have. So thank you very much.
Great.
Have a good evening.
Any questions? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to accept the proposal.
Second.
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to accept the initial proposal from the California School Employees Association. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no, and the motion passes. Moving on to item E, classified position, transportation vehicle driver.
Yes, thank you. This is an item that's brought to us by the Personnel Commission, working with, again, CSEA and our Transportation Director. We have a need where we have now smaller vehicles that are transporting our students. Oftentimes, they're special education students, but they can be for other types of programs as well, field trips or for small service. And again, they may go larger distances, but they're not taking an entire school bus. So we did not have an actual job description that identified the essential duties. So they've gone through the work. We're bringing it to you as a board to confirm the essential duties. If you give it the approval tonight, it returns to the Personnel Commission for final determination of the salary placements and other requirements for the position that the merit system would actually then search to make sure people are qualified. So your process is to, in essence, review the essential duties, ensuring that we're okay with moving forward with this job description.
Great. Any questions? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to approve the new classified position of transportation vehicle driver.
I move approval. Oh.
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to approve the new classified position of transportation vehicle driver. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no, and the motion passes. Moving on to 12 items for information, discussion, and action by board. We have one item A, discussion of district grants. So this item is coming here to continue that conversation about the grant writer. I think, the next steps for getting there is I think we need to look at what we're doing right now grant-wise as a district, where there is support needed, what kinds of grants we've been applying for, what grants we've gotten and haven't gotten, and where something like a grant writer would fit in, and making sure that that is something that there is need for. I think before going into conversation of then approving that. Does that make so that's kind of I just kind of want to have a discussion and then be able to give staff direction to come back to us with more information so we can have a discussion on the grant writer with all the information we need at hand, so that we're not just kind of talking about it, but we have information in front of us to make that decision. Yeah.
And Board President Hernandez, we do have a little bit of information, either myself or Ms. Ibarra can give you some general process. Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, so I have information. I believe I shared it in the beginning of June in a Friday board. Over the last 3 years, we've collected almost $19 million in grants. And we've done that through vendors, grant writing agencies, particularly, we've done the majority of them through resource associates, and then we've had a couple with the collective agency. And over the last 3 years, we've spent roughly almost $74,000 to provide that service and award us $19 million. And some of us, we write some of the grants internally because we have the capacity to do so. What we've liked about working with the grant writing agencies is that oftentimes they will assign them to different people depending upon their area of expertise. And that's something that's been a benefit and an asset to us in that process. So that's kind of why we've been doing this. This has pre-existed me working with this agency, but it's been successful over time. What I will say, though, is we are noticing there is a reduction in grants. Not that there's a reduction in number, but there's a reduction in awards that we're seeing. I think post-COVID there was significant numbers, like the community schools grants. At the federal level, I think at its height, they were awarded 35. This last time it was like 19. So we're seeing a pretty significant drop in what the number of awards that are being granted. But I just wanted to share that update. We can share that again with some updated information because we've even gotten some additional grants since I've shared this in June. So it's up to you. I just wanted you to know that before you started your discussion.
Thank you, Christine. If I could, and just add a little bit, some of the other thinking that we've also had is that while obtaining a grant is fantastic, we have a lot of people applying for different things. We now have a new grant that even our Teacher of the Year is submitted on our behalf for our continuation model school. We're trying to get a new grant there. It's the other concepts you have to consider about the coordination once you actually receive a grant. And primarily, our educational services team does a lot of that work. Our student services team does a lot of that work, but it also layers another level of work on our business services office in tracking those dollars, because it's not as if we just get a check. There are there are auditing processes that they have to go through, tracking the matches of service as well, because sometimes you have to spend your own money to get that other money. So just those considerations that it's wonderful to be out there getting them, but the management also provides a layer onto the district for responsibility that we have to consider. So just some more thoughts.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I think that's exactly, what I'm imagining that I'd love to get more concrete information on, especially, thinking about, you said, we've spent $70,000 to $80,000 to get 19 million grants. Where are the limitations of those in terms of if we spend $160, are we now getting double that? Or what's keeping us from doing that? Like you said, that there's these management pieces and things. And so putting that into context of, where is it that we could potentially think about allocating more spending to be able to increase that grant capacity? Or what is it exactly that's our barrier in increasing our capacity for grants? So I think it'd be great to get a little bit more formal information on some of those things. But yeah, I would love to hear more from the rest of my colleagues on what they think.
Yeah, I think. Thank you for bringing this to the board. So this is a conversation that I've been having, or we've been having, sort of for the last couple of years. So just sort of for context, for federal and state grants, typically you have what they call administrative costs, that 10 to 15% off the top. So let's assume that we got the $19 million. We can assume anywhere between $1.9 to $2.5 million is going to the district for whatever. No, I'm sorry, not whatever, but for administrative costs that you were referring to. And so if we think about that cost over the life of you said that's 3 years of the $19 million? Yes. $2.5 million is far above the cost it would take to build an infrastructure. So if we had a centralized grant, either person or a grant writing team, a lot of those smaller, a lot of the coordination of managing those grants becomes a little bit easier after a couple years because now we have a centralized way to track data, reporting, and those types of things. I mean, I won't go into all the details about grant management, but if we were able to secure a centralized way to apply for and manage grants, I think there would be a net benefit over a couple years, after a couple years. So I'll start there and then we can, unless somebody wanted to respond to that.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, well, I'm just thinking, you're talking about creating if you want to say a department or a group that would be looking at grants only, reviewing them and following them and the results. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so, this was also spurred by, I think, the teachers from Fremont High School.
Yeah.
There was a teacher that came and spoke about I can't remember the exact name of the grant that she applied for, and it was going to sunset after 3 years. After those 3 years, there was not a way for her to capture all the information or all the results of the things that she did, and that grant is just going to go away. A lot of results came from that, and I think this is happening in pockets around the district. If we had a way to centralize that, and we can say, our district is doing these things, and therefore we can apply for these larger grants, because that's kind of sort of the foundation of how those grants work. The population of students that we have capture a lot of the categories that are funded. And if you look at some of the larger districts, or comparative size districts, they do have grant writers, and they are going after some of these funds. I think we can be competitive in going after some of those funds, so that way we're not using general fund to support some students that may have those additional needs. But yes.
Quick question, Ms. Ibarra, how do we currently manage grants?
Depending upon the grant, so if it's a grant that's specific to like social emotional supports and things of that nature, those will typically come out of student support services. And so they'll monitor that, they'll complete the reporting. It really depends on who the director is. We had the anti-bias grant, so that lived with Dr. Phillips under the equity piece. So it really depends. All of the CTE, the career technical education, and all those related to high school, those typically fall under Dr. Wisely to oversee and make sure that those reports are completed. So our staff, they do a fair job of being able to keep up with all of that. It does get, a little bit taxing at times. One of the things that we've learned also is that it can be kind of saturating because the way grants work is they're very specific, right? And so when you have all of these separate and specific, because you can't use grants to sustain a practice, which is the unfortunate part. You get it for a couple of years, you build something, and then that funding disappears, but you can't pick up like another grant to keep it going. And then having the matching component, that's often present. And so then that becomes an additional challenge. And I'd say the final challenge is when you have so many competing initiatives, it gets watered down in a challenge. Just like when we set goals, you can't go deep because you're now trying to do all of these things and grab all of this money. So it's kind of, there's a tipping point for us to be able to really go deep and do something meaningful and then find ways to be able to sustain it long term. So that's like, I'll take, for instance, an example is the mental health clinicians. A lot of that to start was grant funded. And then we were graced with some of that, the post-COVID one-time monies that also assisted us in being able to sustain that service. Now you're getting into, it's like, how do we don't want that service to go away. And so fortunately now we have the CYBHI. Don't ask me what that means. It's like child health, something. But that fee structure that's going to allow us to bill for mental health services for our students, for general education students. So that they say that it's not, we haven't gotten to see the reimbursements yet. It will help sustain those services, but it might not. And pretty much told us, don't expect it to cover everything, but it will help us to maintain. So it's just, we're afraid to take on too many things and then you lose it after 3 years. So we have to be very thoughtful in how we approach our grants. If that makes sense.
And how we keep programs and services that are strong, right? So it's a waste of time and energy to get a grant, get a good pilot program or people, and then all of a sudden we can't do it anymore. That's the waste.
And we know how implementation works, right? It's like the third year is when it's really getting good, and then you have to pull back, and then that becomes frustrating. So we just have to be
And we
really
shouldn't have to pull back.
Right.
If it's a priority, we need
Right.
to look at our systems to see what
Exactly.
need to go that
It's a balance.
aren't
Yes,
effective, and then how do we keep the things that are?
absolutely.
Can I ask a follow-up question to
Yes.
Dr. Lathan? So currently, how are the grant successes centralized? So for example, if I were to ask, you mentioned mental health. If I were to ask, what has been the impact of the mental health grants over the last 3 years on our student outcomes? Could we pull that information? Do we have a centralized way to pull that information for all of our? And again, I'm not asking the answer. I'm just saying, for example.
Yes, they do collect that.
And
The providers do collect that through their agencies, so whether it's Lincoln Center, Fred Finch, Wellness Together, they gather that data. We are able to look at how often, how many students they've served, how long they've had to provide service, and so forth. They do collect that and give it to us in a summary data.
So let me ask that question in a different way. Is there a centralized way? So for example, for those 4 organizations that you mentioned, each one of them gives you a report. Is that report then brought into the district, centralized, and like a regression analysis and all that stuff is done to say this is the impact that we had? We have the ability to do that now.
Yes.
We do.
I think not to get like ahead of ourselves. I think it's worth, if the rest of my trustees agree, I think it's worth just getting some of these parts and pieces kind of like in a presentation organization so that we all understand like this is the way that like grants work and this is what we're doing here in our school district, just so that the conversation we're having isn't so much of these like hypotheticals and that we have something to actually have a conversation on, and I think then we can discuss whether it still makes sense or not to move forward with a grant writer. And do we feel, so I think I'm getting enough nods, yes. And then Dr. Martinez and Ms. Ibarra, do you feel like you have enough direction or sense of the kinds of questions and things that people might want to see based off, I think, some of the comments and things that people were talking about? Great. All right.
I would say we'd be able to coordinate at least getting some more information down where you can see how we're effectuating the grants right now. I think part of the conversation I was hearing is that the strategic thinking about where we put our resources, right? Because if in fact we're applying for everything and we get a lot of different things, but it's not coordinated, then we have a lot of things happening, but it's not really effectuating the changes that we want to do. Knowing now where the board is with our NCUS studies, our audits, knowing where our ed services team is with our implementation of our professional development and moving into PLCs. I think we're in a better frame to then look at everything we have and also make some decisions, because we know that we can't sustain everything once grant funding ends. So we have to look forward, and we have to be able to think, what do our students need? What do our scholars need over the next several years that matches where the goals are of the board right now? And how can staff also sustain that? Because there are limitations. There's limited number of people to do limited levels of work. And so again, getting back to the question, if we need more people to do more work, then that's something that your superintendent would come back and say, we need to put some more money here, or the board could suggest we need some more services in this area. So I think it's a coordination, but I think we have some good guidance to get some items down for continuing conversation.
Okay, sounds good. Great. Moving on to 13 resolutions for first reading. We have none. 14 resolutions for immediate action. We have item A, Resolution 2024-2535, authorizing provisional internship permit.
Thank you. Yes, you've seen similar resolutions. This is for our individuals who are obtaining their provisional internship permits, all 3 areas in special education. So we look for your approval so we can have these people move forward while they're going through their programs.
Great. I'll entertain
Second.
Great, so it's been properly moved and seconded to approve the resolution on the authorizing provisional internship permit. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. And the motion passes. Moving on to 14B, Resolution 2024-2536, authorizing instructors to teach outside of credential authorization for the 2024-25 school year.
Yes, thank you. And again, the document that you have before you is a confirmation that these individuals do hold certifications, but their assignment may call for an area of certification that they are able to teach, given their knowledge and their expertise, but they may not have the formal certification. So through this process, we're authorizing them to be in these assignments to provide their service. And again, you can see all the items there.
Great. Unless there's any questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Great. So it's been properly moved and seconded to adopt the resolution authorizing instructors to teach outside of credential authorization for the 2024-25 school year. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. And the motion passes. Moving on to 15 resolutions for second reading and action. There are none. 16 board policies for first reading. There are none. 17 board policies for second reading and action. There are none. 18 information items for general information. There are none. 19 future agenda items from board members. We can start with Trustee Lewis.
So I don't have any.
Great. Vice President Rocha.
The last time we talked about special education, I thought maybe we could have a session where we could sit down and actually understand the process, parent involvement, how it works, and just to find out. It's always an issue with finances for the district concerning special ed, but it's a big one, and I think Dr. Lathan, you were on top of that. We were talking about a presentation on that, right, in the past?
Yes, in a committee, a subcommittee.
Yeah, so I think all of us should be involved in the information, not so much a committee, but all of us to be educated on special education in itself. That's what I'm asking for. And my second item is somehow a report back, maybe on a Friday. I've had parents call and they're concerned about the safety of their children and what's going on in the district. And I know that we've had to hire a couple of more patrol people. So just a general understanding of how we're doing. Thank you.
Trustee Lathan? No. Trustee Hack? No. Great. Moving on to additional comments which exceeded the first 30-minute session limit. We don't have any. And then reports and comments from board members. And we'll start on the other side, this time with Trustee Hack.
I just think it's neat. I make every effort to get to school sites on a regular basis and just to see what's happening. That's very important to me, to be physically there to see what's going on. Not necessarily to talk to anybody or do anything serious, but just to be there. One of my favorite things to do is go and see crossing guards. And these ladies, mostly some guys, they do a lot of safety stuff. And just good personalities and everything else. So when somebody walks up to them and says, "Hey, how you doing?" They are very open to sharing that. So I like to do that kind of stuff. Yep, that's it.
Trustee Lathan.
Yes, I wanted to acknowledge the young person that was killed over the weekend on Friday, September 20th. And do you know the person's name? So I got a name from the principal of Antioch High that the young man's name is Keontae Young. I wanted to verify that with another staff person, but that is the name I was given. So just condolences to that young man's family. Apparently he was a late teenager, and it was just tragic. I connected with Councilwoman Tamisha Torres Walker, and we talked about the need for city-school partnership again, and she told me she had connected with President Hernandez as well. But she and I are just brainstorming ideas of ways, because in both our district, when you think about the school-to-prison pipeline and the current outcomes we have that are very racialized for African-American and Latino students, that is when we suspend students, when we expel students, when students have higher rates of Ds and Fs, when there's low attendance rates or chronic absenteeism, like all of these things contribute to the school to prison pipeline, and our numbers are pretty big. Hence, that's why we have the equity audits and why principals and staff are working on the things they are this year. But thinking about that and the violence that occurs in our community, we are brainstorming ways in which to bring folks together so that we can interrupt it from the school level all the way until adulthood. So the more we prepare our kids and they're able to have, be prepared for college and or career, or both, then there's a less likelihood of violence in our community. And so that's something she and I are brainstorming, and I will definitely bring it back, bring anything back to the board if there's anything that we need to do, and to provide updates to the board and the district. We'll have some district folks involved, especially student services, just thinking about the number of expulsions and kind of some culture things. So just really heartbreaking about that young man. I have a son that's 32, and I could not imagine what this family is going through. So that's that. I will say I appreciate the way the staff responded, our staff, to make sure that our students are safe and that there were adults around to provide kind of a safety net for our young people. I will be, I visited a few schools since our last board meeting. John Muir, just a quick update, met with Principal Flossie, and some of their goals are around K2 phonics, which is, the whole district is working on that, providing rigorous instruction and focusing on intensified support for small groups. And so I thought that was great. And then also for K5, mastering numeracy or math facts. And all of the principals could relate back to their equity audits and just kind of the outcomes from their standardized assessments as well. Fremont Elementary School met with Principal Sylvia Ramirez, and their school is focusing on teachers mastering their own grade level standards, which I thought was great. Like, how do teachers know the standards? Common formative assessments, small group instruction. So a lot of cross-cutting themes between the elementary schools. And then lastly, Antioch High School, we mostly talked today, I actually met with the principal for his walkthrough, but we mostly talked about the plan to support students regarding the death of the young person in that community, in that area. And then any preventative work, we were just kind of talking about that. But also we went and I observed a class, I want to say it was biotech, but the students were engaged in labs on isotopes, and it was so neat, and they were able to share and show me the Petri dishes and kind of the things that they were doing. So that is the one classroom we were able to visit, and for the other two schools, we visited multiple classrooms. So that's it for me. Thank you for listening.
Great. Vice President Rocha.
Talking about, you mentioned Mr. Flossie, Principal Flossie. Condolences to him for his loss of his father. The services will be this Friday, I believe. And other than that, I just can't tell you enough how much I enjoyed the workshop that was given to us, where we were able to attend. And he was marvelous instructor. I learned a lot, took a lot of notes, and it's amazing what's going on and the change that's going on. Thank you.
Trustee Lewis.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention the violence that's going on in the community, but inspired by Trustee Dr. Jag. My son and I have a son who's 11, so he's entering that stage when he's going from what I think is a cute young man to potentially being a feared person, or however that's received in the community. It's terrifying, and I had a friend when I first was elected. I mentioned my best friend was killed when I was 17. So these things are re-traumatizing, like figuring out ways to sort of connect with the community and actually have constructive conversations. Because again, on the dais, we can say all these things, our heart's in it, but it also involves the community. So I don't know, I don't have the answer. I don't have some poetic thing to say. I just really hope that we can come together as a community to sort of resolve these things, because talking to my best friend's mom 30 years later, or it's not 40 years, 30 years later, she's still heartbroken. The newspapers don't call anymore. The news is gone. That pain doesn't go away. And so I encourage us all to think about the sort of down the line consequences of some of the things that we're doing. And so thank you for inspiring that and the work that you guys are doing with Councilwoman Torres Walker. And so on a more positive note, one of the things that I'm really proud of my time, because my time on the board is coming closely to an end, one of the most wonderful things that I've had, and it still happens quite a bit, is people stopping me in the community talking about what we do here, but they also come to me and talk to me about opportunities. And last week, I actually had Principal Sylvia from Fremont bumped into each other at a coffee shop, and she had some staff with her. We ended up connecting her son to some services and getting him back on the road to employment. So those types of activities are always wonderful to see, and in my mind, that's what community is, building opportunities for each other. And then lastly, last week I was able to connect Dr. Wisely to a couple of the programs that we talked about, and it looks like they're going to be moving forward and bringing those into the district and creating more opportunities for students. One of the programs that I mentioned last session was a program for 18 to 26-year-olds, getting them certifications in tech. And so it looks like it's free of charge. It's no cost to the district. It's no cost to the students. And they get an internship at the end of that program. So it looks like that program is coming in. There's another program where we're partnering with not partnering, but we're connected with the Navy cadets for elementary and middle school students, and it teaches some of the survival skills and things like that. So these programs, I think, would be really helpful for young people and helping them to kind of figure out what they want to do. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of really great work, I think, happening in the school district. I think want to highlight and uplift that principal professional development session. I think, all the data says that who is the most trusted person in a school district, in a school, it's the principal. When people think about who's in charge, who makes the decisions, they don't think about us here on the school board. They don't think about the central district office staff. They think about the principal. And so to focus on our principals and getting them all on the same page in a shared room with a shared vision, moving forward in a shared direction, I think is a really powerful thing and a really hard and challenging thing. So really, thank you to all of our staff that made that happen. It's not easy to get all of our principals to step away from their school sites for an entire day of professional development. But I think it adds a lot of value and is exactly the kinds of organizational steps that we need to take and are taking to really transform our school district. So it was really great to be there and see, all of our principals really engaged in that. I've been visiting some of our school sites. So I've stopped by at Sutter Elementary, Black Diamond Middle School, and then Bidwell and Live Oak. And it's been, again, really great to see the ways that people are excited and energized by, these types of professional development, applying the results of the in-cus equity audits. So things are really, I think, moving forward in a really great way. And I see a lot of really great energy going on here in this school district. And then I do want to highlight, that as my fellow trustees have said, that gun violence is a challenge in this school district, in this community, in this area, and when I say that I spend time trying to think about these things, trying to bring more resources here, trying to find ways to address these problems, and all the time that I spend doing things. I really do mean it. One of the things I'm working on as a graduate student at Stanford in my public policy program is we're working on a gun violence reduction program. So I'm working with Stanford professors, a few other graduate students, and some powerful nonprofits in the area that are looking to how can we address gun violence that's going on specifically in regards to children, to the youth, because there's a lot of things that target gun violence broadly, but there's less resources that are specifically targeting as what's happening with our students. I'm excited that as we conclude that project over the course of this year, that I'll be able to bring some of those lessons learned, some of the resources that these organizations have now to our community. So when I'm making these long commutes down to Stanford and coming back here at the end of the day, I mean, today that's why I was a little bit late, is, making that 3 hours of traffic when you go at rush hour time to make it here. It is all with the intention and purpose of trying to bring more resources, more thinking, more perspectives, and address the problems that we have going on here. I'm glad that my fellow trustees brought that up and are facing these things kind of head on, because I think it can be hard and challenging to face those kinds of issues head on and to really spend the time thinking about it, because they're hard things to think about. So I'll end my comments there.
Trustee Hernandez, you owe us 2 books.
Oh yeah, I owe you 3 books now. Like I said, I came straight here, so I didn't bring them with me, so I didn't have a chance to stop by home. So I'll bring them next time.
I have one more thing, if you're not going to talk about it.
Yes, sure, Trustee Latham.
Were you done, or you want to
Yeah.
some more? Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. And because it's public, I can talk about it, but it was on the news recently about the allegations and the investigation from one of our employees, and the fact that I just want to apologize to our classified staff and our certificated staff who endured harm from an employee who was not well behaved. And so I just want to acknowledge that, because we have not, as a board, unanimously talked about it, and we can't because of personnel issues. But I just wanted to just put that out there, that we heard you, and we hope that we can move forward in positivity.
Great. Moving on to future meetings. Our next meetings are October 30th and November 13th. Lastly, adjournment. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So did we end the meeting last time in honor of Latino Heritage? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Because if not, I was going to suggest we do that this time.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
What we want to say. I move adjournment.
Second.
Great. So it's been properly moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say no. And the motion passes.